Hey, what's up everybody? 8-Bit Flashback here. In this video, I will show you how to add 800 plus games to your Sega Genesis Mini in 4 minutes or less using the TrueBlue Mini Genesis UltraDrive. This is a USB hack stick that plugs into your Genesis Mini and adds 800 plus games to the stock user interface, along with box art and game save support, just like the stock 42 games that come pre-installed on the Genesis Mini. The TrueBlue Mini is somewhat of a controversial product, due to it not being officially licensed and various other reasons. So this might not be for everyone. And if you're looking for a free option to hack your Genesis Mini, be sure to check out Project Lunar. For those of you out there who are interested in this item, I did get mine from ploylab.com, and I'll make sure to leave a link to their site down below. Now let's see what we get inside the box. Here is the Genesis UltraDrive USB flash drive. And this is 16 gigabytes and it's set for read only, so you cannot write anything new to this flash drive. Here's the USB hub so you can play 2-player games. And here is a micro USB cable that does read data. And you will need a cable that reads data or something similar to perform the hack for the Genesis Mini. So let's go ahead and get started with hacking the Genesis Mini. So to start off with, you want to head over to truebluemini.com, and I'll make sure to leave a link down below. And we're going to download the TrueBlue Flasher for Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and you can save it wherever you want, but I'm going to save it to my desktop. And this is only like a 10 megabyte file, so it's pretty small. And it comes in a zip file, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And then I'm going to extract the contents to my desktop, and you can put the contents wherever you choose on your computer. But for me, it's just easier to leave it on the desktop. After extracting that file, you should now have a TrueBlue Flasher application. So now you want to go ahead and double click on that and open it up. And because this is a newer unsigned application, you may get a message from your Windows software or your virus protection software saying not to run this program. But I just ignored that message and ran it anyway. So this is a very simple hack to do. We can do this in about 4 minutes or less. So the first thing I'm going to do once I get this application opened up is install the driver to my computer. And what this is going to do is allow my computer to communicate with my Sega Genesis Mini. So right now it's adding that driver to my computer, and it's also adding an extra folder to my desktop as well. And this takes about 1 minute or less to install. Now it's time to grab a micro USB cable that does read data. And just to let you know, the micro USB cable that does come supplied with your Genesis Mini does not support data. So you can either use the very short cable that comes supplied with the Genesis UltraDrive or your own data cable. Now go ahead and make sure that your Sega Genesis Mini is in the off position, and go ahead and plug the micro USB cable into the back of the Sega Genesis Mini, then plug the other end into your PC. Now what we want to do is press the reset button and continue to hold it, then turn the power button on, then continue to hold the reset button for about 10 seconds. So we'll wait a few more seconds here. Now we're going to let go of the reset button, and now my console should be in a mode where it's ready to install the hack. And you should also hear some sort of chime response from your Windows software letting you know it is communicating with the Sega Genesis Mini. Now it's time to go back to that TrueBlue Flasher application and click on Install Hacks to the console. Now it says it takes about 2 minutes, but for me it took about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And at a future point, if you want to uninstall this hack from your console, you do the same process, but instead of clicking on Install Hack, you click on the Uninstall Hack from Console button. After it's done installing the hack, you're going to get a couple different messages, and it's going to tell you to wait for that red light to turn off, then go ahead and turn the power off to your console and unhook it from your PC. So the red light is now off, so I'm going to turn the power off, then unplug the micro USB cable from the back of my console and unplug it from the PC. Now it's time to grab my Genesis UltraDrive and plug it into the Player 1 port. Now if you want to play 2-player games, you're going to want to plug the USB hub into the second player port. So that'll plug in right here. Now we'll plug in that first controller to player port 1 and the second controller into player port 2. And not to make this confusing, but sometimes the port 2 on the USB hub becomes player 1 when you start a game, and sometimes it's the opposite. Now it's time to plug in our micro USB power cable and the HDMI cable, then turn the power on, and this will take a little bit longer than normal to boot because there's quite a bit more games. And once it does finally boot, we should be greeted by a new screen. So if you've installed this hack correctly, you're going to be greeted by a new boot screen that's going to contain a bunch of new folders. or it might boot to the main user interface, where it's going to contain a bunch of new games. Now, before we continue, I would like to share an issue that I did have with the Genesis UltraDrive. With the console that I purchased on launch day, I could not get the Genesis UltraDrive to work with it. After installing the hacks and booting it up for the first time, this was the screen that I was greeted by. And no matter what I tried, I could not get the Genesis UltraDrive to work with the console that I purchased on launch day. The only thing I could do was uninstall the hacks and get my Genesis back to normal. So I decided to buy a second Genesis Mini just to see if I could get the Genesis UltraDrive to work with that. And to my surprise, it worked the first try. So I'm not sure what's going on, but there seems to be some compatibility issues. So here's a look at the folder boot screen, and the first 4 folders are going to be just the stock games for the different regions, and then the rest of the folders are going to be the new games that are installed on the Genesis UltraDrive. And as you can see here, these folders are organized alphabetically. Now let's go ahead and open up one of these folders, and we'll pick the first one that contains new games, and that does start with the numbered games. And each one of these folders does contain approximately 100 games. Now, because there is so many games included with the Genesis UltraDrive, I have not been able to test everything, but I have tested quite a few games, and most of them are playing pretty good for the most part. However, there is a small percentage of games that don't play very well. Now let's go ahead and try out Bubsy 2, and this game does play pretty well. For the emulation, it does use the stock emulator, which is called M2 Engage, and it does seem to have pretty good compatibility for most Mega Drive and Sega Genesis games, but it's definitely not 100% compatibility. That's why there's some games that don't work so well. If you're looking to save a game, that works the same way as the stock games. You just push the reset button on the Sega Genesis Mini, and that brings up the system menu where you can select your save game slot and then return back to the main menu. Now let's pick another game. Let's play Batman. Now, as far as the loading times for when you start a game to when it actually loads, it's pretty quick. I don't notice anything different from the original 42 games. The only time there seems to be an issue with loading times is when you're booting up the console. It takes a little bit longer, but that's only about 10 to 15 seconds. That's really not a big deal. So this game seems to be playing great. I remember playing this game back in the day on Nintendo, and this version's pretty similar, but of course it's got some updated graphics. Now, if you want to get back to the folder boot menu, it's easy to do. You just push the C button. Anytime you're in the main user interface, just push that C button, and that'll take you back to the boot folder menu. Let's go ahead and pick another folder. We'll pick the next one, which will be the C through E games. And inside this one will be another 100 games. And there is just a little bit of a wait time. Each time you pick a folder, you have to wait a few seconds, but it's not that bad. And we'll go ahead and try Double Dragon 2: The Revenge. Now, this is one of those games that doesn't have very good emulation with the M2 Engage emulator. As you can see, I got some pretty bad slowdown, and it's just very sluggish. And I'd say this game is just not very playable. And to be honest, I probably tested about 40 different games, and this is the only game that I got to load that I consider unplayable. And I did have some other minor issues with some of the multi-cart games. What would happen is I could load the multi-cart and pick one game to play, but I could not switch to another game. So there's some other issues out there that I ran into, but again, most of the games were working fine. As far as the gaming lineup goes with the Genesis UltraDrive, it's got a pretty big selection to choose from. It does have some homebrew games in here mixed in with some original games, and I'd say there's something for everyone on here. Okay, it's time for me to get out of here, but if you liked this video, if you could, hit that like button and subscribe, and have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time.